Here we are again, show number 98. We're encroaching on that 100.
Wow, isn't that incredible? We've actually had something to say almost every week for almost 2 years.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. We could have done this in a way, as project managers, we should be paying attention. We should have started season 3, which is kind of what we're looking at today, on number 100. But
that being said, I like having us to actually mark this conversation as our new series of episodes on this show. You and I have been hinting around this, and now we actually get to lay things out.
Well, lay things out, put things to bed. Look, why don't we just get started? Do you have something that you can get us started with? A little vignette, a little idea as to kind of to nicely, smoothly put us into the mood for the new year?
Yeah. So I had just gotten my associate's degree in 1990, 91, and immediately upon graduating, I was hired by a transportation company. And they had 3 tasks that the entire corporation internationally had to go through. And here I was in New Mexico. Number 1, they were transforming to a new type of network, from token ring to TCP/IP for you technologists. Number 2, they were going from a mainframe or a centralized model to a distributed processing model. And number 3, finance had just relinquished the ownership of IT, and IT was becoming its own organization. And here I was brought in. And in the middle of this, I was saying, how much more confusing could it get? And that was just the beginning. That set the foundation for the rest of my experience career. And I remembered, that one of my friends and I in the mid-90s was saying, one of the forbidden phrases that we're going to say is, what else could possibly be happening? Because if you say that, you're going to make it happen. And whether it was tech transformation or changes in politics or social or cultural environment or whatever, there was always a major change that we had to contend with. And business had to transform around it. And projects and project manager had to respond to that change. And that's when I first started thinking about what I was prepared to talk to you about today. How do we make sense of this all where we are right now?
So tell me again, roughly what year was that?
1991, 92.
So I guess, we talked the last couple weeks about, for example, how artificial intelligence and Chat GPT and some of these things snuck up on us. But if that was your experience back in the 1990s, and it certainly reconciles with my experiences, we live as IT expert, as project managers, in a world of constant change. In fact, I think the only thing that is constant is the fact that things change.
Yes, change. And in fact, that's why project managers and project management exist. They only exist because business finds a value in creating a separate set of work and creating a leader of that work and setting aside the resources and time for all that structure to hopefully raise the probability of success for that change. That's what our career is. Go ahead.
It is. And here's what's interesting, Tim, and this is what's frustrated me over the years. And perhaps that's why I started my company and named it People First Project Management. And that is that even back, in the 90s, when I was training as a project manager, all of my education, all of my training, all of my mentorship was to surround myself by the technical aspects of bringing in a project on time, within budget, and that sort of thing. And this, what we're talking about now, and what you just alluded to, was that we as project managers need to be more than just technicians. to be able to do the arts and charts on the wall, the nice Gantt charts, the nice schedules, all of that. We have to truly be masters of industry as well as captains of our technology.
There's a reason for this too. There's two facets of change. Number one, it's the change itself and its influence, and then how human beings respond to change. And if we don't have a good grasp and a good understanding of both of those at the same time, we're not doing the work we manage justice.
So maybe to put this in context for those who are listening, and especially for, and I feel for young project managers or novice project managers who are just trying to get into this world, and they're inundated with all of the, like I said before, the arts and the charts and all of the technical aspects. So what are some of the aspects do you think that we can have some of our neophyte or novice project managers start to think about the influences that we as project managers need to address if we're to be successful?
Boy, let's look at categories, and maybe we can drill into the categories. Of course, if you follow, the business part of the project management framework, we have our enterprise environmental factors and our organizational process assets. And so when we're talking about major influences, we're talking about change, and we're talking about things that we don't have control of generally, like COVID, like supply chain, like we need to find a new product, we need to find a new market, and or the laws in government have changed, and how does the corporation respond, and based on how the corporation responds, how does this project need to respond? That's the big picture. What I'd like to look at is the head of the whole change influencer, which are these internal and external environmental changes and impacts.
So are you saying, Tim, that me as a project manager has to really do more than just assign tasks to my team, monitor those tasks for completion, check them off on my project Gantt chart, and report out once a week as to my progress? You're saying that I have to do more than just that?
Oh, certainly. And in fact, even more today than previously, but it's always been a fact that the planning is primarily understanding these influences. And number one, how the project have to actually consider those influences as you're building out the work and the activities. But second of all, what if these things change? What if we have a change in a law or a change in the weather, and we have to be prepared to understand that's business. Now, we're not even talking about our corporations and how they respond to it. I'm just talking about the initial influencing factors themselves. So we have to be connected into, how do businesses look at the business environment, and who are the people around me who can actually keep me most plugged in? Finding those experts and finding the people who do this work commonly, and then creating a relationship with them such that I can bug them whenever I have questions that they can help me answer.
And it's interesting. I grew up in the time when we as IT professionals, and certainly as project managers of IT large projects, we were looked at with some mystique. We could walk down the halls of our business organization, and it's almost like people were whispering, saying, "Oh, there goes that's one of them. That's one of those smart guys." Because around the whole idea around IT was there was a mystique, and I think sometimes IT professionals played that up a lot. Like, we're pretty good, we're untouchable. But I think what's happened, well, I know what's happened is, back then we used to try to have business understand a little bit of what we do, just a little bit. But now, in terms of, I think the question I asked before, that what are some of the major influences we find that we need to address as PMs? I think one of the major ones to me is that we have to understand business almost as well as business understands their own business.
See, that's exactly the same key. That's exactly what I'm looking at. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. And if I have to be the smartest person in the room, that means I'm going to be training more than doing the work of managing the project. I want to bring in the voices and the opinions of people, maybe not the egos, but the voices and the opinions of people who can actually help me solve problems. And so those people who are the experts in the business are not going to tell me, here's how you learn business. They're going to tell me, oh, you have this problem, here's what you're going to do, and building that network. Now, the mystique is really interesting because I'm finding myself, it's transforming right now from a mystique of, I don't understand what they're doing, to all of a sudden, oh, that's what those philosophers were talking about 2,000 years ago. And this is common language. It's not like me exposing this fact that philosophy has talked about a style of leading and managing working people that's more effective. It's like everybody understands this. And so it's actually having people, number one, understand that this is something learnable. Number two, giving people time to actually explore this concept and practice it. And this is what I'm finding is really different. We don't have nearly the amount of time that we had on my projects back in the late 90s to do the research and have discussions and comment and question and prod like we did back then. We can't do that now. Work is too fast. It's too urgent.
Well, not only that is, by the time you complete your discussion, someone's come up with a new product that you could implement to make your job easier or more conducive to what the end user is looking for.
So here I was, just to accentuate what you said. Here I was talking to 2 or 3 friends about what would happen if AI integrated into software tools, and what would we be able to do, and how would we be able to play with these tools. And lo and behold, I was out on one of these blog sites. I think it was Medium. And there were 3 articles on project management and AI, and 2 of them were promotions for new products that are using advanced AI concepts in actually looking at probabilistic outcomes for estimates as well as decision making. It's frightening.
It's an exciting, frightening.
Yeah.
But I think here's the thing. And up until now, the last couple of years, we have concentrated a lot on the fundamentals of project management. And we've sort of used as I'll use this term, textbook almost, the Project Management Institute's PMBOK. We started, I think, with version 6, version 7. Not so much that we were talking about the techniques as much as we were talking about application of technique. But I think this year, as we look at the project management skill set and the career of a project manager going forward, I think what we want to talk about, and again, I want to stress, this is yours and my opinions based on our experience, as vast or as limited as that experience may be. But when we look kind of the next several episodes that we want to talk about, I think what we want to concentrate on and focus on are those skills that the project manager will need to embellish in their own resume and their own skill set to be able to move forward in this ever-changing, quickly changing world of IT.
Yeah, now there's 2 levels to that, and you're exactly right. Number one, how do I remain relevant at work? How can I maintain a paycheck? And the second one is, how can I actually do work that's satisfying that I can do for at least 2 years and maybe up to a decade? And how can I do it in such a way, like I said, is satisfying and fulfilling? Project management is not an easy craft, and it tends to attract a very unique set of people. And it's fascinating that you and I have observed that the necessary skills and attributes required seem to be in transformation. But you know what? We see this in the actions and the communication of PMI itself back from 2015 to today too, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, in preparing for today's podcast, I was looking back just to remind myself of some of the changes that came through in version 7 of the body of knowledge. And the focus has definitely changed to from one of more of a process orientation to one now of a leadership, agility, resilience, sort of the business model and the personal development model of the project manager to be most effective in delivering systems.
Yes. As an example, back in 2015, the release of the talent triangle, the communication of the PMI's communication along with that said, hey, project managers, pay attention here. You know, we're going to be testing you on 40% leadership and 10% business. And everything else we've been talking about, that's half the exam. And it's like, oh my. And then all of a sudden, you know, we get this practice guide called Agile that they built in collaboration with the Agile Alliance. So you know they're serious about doing this. And then, like you said, that the release of the 6th edition PMBOK with the Agile Practice Guide is saying what you're saying. You know, we have to think about the way we do work, not just, you know, following these steps and inputs and outputs. It's not about inputs and outputs. Think about that as a paradigm shift. We're not looking at acquiring tools and ways of approaching. Here's how you do the schedule. It's like you have 2 toolkits, 3 toolkits, even 7 toolkits that you have to bring with you to actually understand this. And then it's not about the tools. It's about the ability to select the right tools for the right situation. That's where I think PMI's wisdom is actually hitting spot on today.
Well, I think it is because it's talking application more than process. And what I'm finding, even today, as I'm watching some very solid practitioners in IT, and I'm talking specifically now, you brought up Agile. Again, the concentration of documentation and conversation around how to do things. Well, you know, we do scrums this way. How about we do scrums because of the output that we're expecting from the scrum? Who cares the format? Yes, there's a process, there's a format, but don't concentrate on that. The scrum was not successful because you didn't do it correctly. No, the scrum was not successful because you didn't get the right output.
Yes. That's, you know, this is beautiful, because that's, you know, that's what I find talking to my students about. They're the perfect tool, the perfect framework is something that I don't have to think about when I use it. When I'm using a tool that's taking up time from getting work done, that's when I'm not using the right tool.
Yeah. And by the way, would a project go off the rails if you missed a stand-up in the morning? Or if the stand-up went 30 minutes instead of 20? I mean, people, you know, and again, I'm being facetious, but that's how sometimes we as project managers and as IT professionals, we get caught up too much in the process and not enough in what is it that we're trying to do as a result of implementing that process. But I have another question. I'm going to kind of switch off this topic just a little bit. My question to you originally was, what are the major influences that we find that we need to address as PMs? And the implication was, aside from the technical knowledge and skill level that we've been developing all along anyway. But I know you do a lot of research on the side, and what, in terms of reviewing certain survey results and certain expertise, say some from sources like PMI and others, what are you finding that the organizations are suggesting that may be critical influences for project managers to pay attention to?
Unplanned events.
Hmm.
Unplanned events. It's been so quiet. It's been so quiet for the last 50, 75 years. We haven't had major wars. We haven't had major disease outbreaks until COVID. Back to 1918, we were conquering every disease. We haven't had a major earthquake or a major volcanic event like 526 that got rid of summer for a few years. It's been relatively quiet. And of course, we've been successful. And I think we've been lulled into a sense of complacency. And I believe the last 5 or 6 years have been a call to action for companies to not be so optimistic, to get back into our understanding of what risk management exists for and what quality management exists for, and for us to do a more thorough assessment of risk and quality management. I think that these are going to come to the forefront, at least maybe not from a quantitative, an analytical standpoint, but at least a qualitative, have risk, at least a partner at the table we can discuss things with.
How about things like the cultural aspects? From my mind, and this is just from my observation, I think the culture has changed in terms of workforce, and pandemic aside, I think the culture has been changing in such a way that, psychologists and others have decided to label certain generations with certain letters and that sort of thing. Have the experts also commented on whether or not the cultural changes that we're observing are going to affect what it is that we need to do?
In many ways, yes. So there's two examples that are trending in a lot of the research. Number one, technology transformation. And whenever you have such a transformation as we're experiencing right now, and I'm not just talking about AI, I'm talking about a lot of things, you're going to have disruption. And we always think of these things as gifts, opportunities, but those disruptions are threats. And we have to really understand, it's a two-edged sword when these things happen. Now, let's also, consider things like, what have companies done with this lull in these emergencies that we have not been having? Well, they've been applying lean. And this is a discussion that I'm finding is happening. We have leaned ourselves as businesses and corporations to ultimate efficiency. I think we've done an excellent job. And when we went through COVID, we found that we weren't running at an optimal model. We were running at an extremely lean model. So our supply chain in so many sectors of food and dry goods and other materials didn't just break down. It was full stop for a while. And I'm not just talking about, paper goods in the store, you couldn't get them for a couple of weeks, but I'm talking about, having available people and this kind of thing. And as project managers, we have to realize that we were a bit short-sighted too. And we are short-sighted to a certain extent as project managers, because we're insulated from a lot of this, because that's a business problem. That's not a project manager problem. Well, guess what?
Well, what you just said is kind of the premise for this whole year, is that we as project managers need to get our heads, our ostrich heads, out of the sand of technology and process, and look around and see business needs us as their full partners. And we can definitely contribute to the success, not just of the projects. I can bring in a project on time and within budget, but did that project and the end result of that project, in fact, enhance the ability for my business partners to do their work and to beat their competition, to satisfy their customers? I think that's the part that we want to talk about over the next year or so, to make sure that we are full partners with business. And I think we'll talk about this later, and that business, we encourage them to become full partners with us.
Yes, it's not enough to know the business environment. It's to know the business and have relationships that are effective enough so that we can actually capture the information, not just what's happening out there, but how is my organization, corporation responding to those changes, so I can maintain continuity of my little island of work. That's the key. That's where I hope to go to too, because number one, we have all of these influences like we've been talking about, and then business responding to it. Number two, let me give you an example. So we had remote work, right? Now, everybody had to work remotely. What has happened in the last few months with all the corporations, once that the pandemic was declared no longer a major factor? All the corporations are saying what?
Well, a lot of the ones that I'm aware of want people back in the offices. But what were you getting? Is that what you were getting at?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's interesting, but a lot of staff don't really want to do that. The autonomy, the freedom of working in your pajamas. I mean, there's something about that is kind of compelling. And yet for me, as a 40 plus year industry expert, I want to be in that office working hand in hand, where I can, touch the shoulder of one of my programmers or shake the hand of my business lead. So it's a difference of style perhaps, but I think there's also an efficiency there where we're actually seeing each other face to face.
I think about this often. I think that as individual workers, we know what is needed to manage our personal work, our individual work remotely. I think we can be successful now that we've actually gone through something like the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
I think we can be. The big question, and this is a question that I'm asking everybody to try to answer, okay? Have we learned how to manage virtual teams? Do we know what it means and what it takes to manage our remote workers? I don't think the conversation is there yet. And that's what I hope to actually explore with you.
Right. And just as a real quick summary, because I like that topic, I think we can devote an entire podcast to it. But from my observations, we have learned from a task orientation perspective. I don't think we've learned from a social interaction and influence perspective how to do it online. There is nothing like walking the halls of a large project and stopping and having a coffee or a conversation over the water cooler with whoever it is that we're discussing with. That's a lot easier than saying, oh, maybe I will use some sort of video call to talk to my project manager at this point, assuming I can get that person online. So that's my 2 cents, and I think we can develop an entire podcast around it. Technically, I think we have become task-oriented good managers. On the other parts of management, not so much.
Yeah, and again, what we can actually explore with this, and this is what I'm willing to bet. I think if we can learn how to actually manage remotely, I think it will improve how we actually manage people face to face as well, because I think that the same tools and the same behavior that a manager expresses remotely in increasing engagement of their people can also increase engagement with people that they're working face to face.
You know, there's there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said, because I used to say the same thing about just how just teaching my staff how to write emails. There's a way to write an email that comes across as perfunctory, task oriented, to the point, and no soul in that email. There's also a way to write an email that encourages the listener, encourages them to respond and to do a better job. So just even, an email is the most abstract form perhaps of remote management, but there are ways to set tone. There are ways to do exactly what you talked about from a video perspective that can help our staff, even in a remote situation, to do better.
Let me give you a sample of what we could talk about this year.
Yeah.
There's a term that we use in speaking and oratory or rhetoric. It's called conviction. Speak in a way that convinces people. And actually, conviction has an aspect of emotional content. And this goes back to the model of rhetoric, where we use our logic and our ethics and our emotions together in chorus to actually influence and motivate people through our communication. And what if we were able to actually build and refine our ability to talk about things in a convincing way, or with conviction, where just the way it's expressed carries the value of the message itself.
Yeah, and that's in word choice, that's in tone, that's in inflection. They don't teach you that at project management school.
Yeah. And you know what? I think there's a lot of opportunity to us to find other things that we can have that actually maintain relevance within a business environment as well as the project environment.
So that's we've been having, this is great conversation, by the way, from the project manager's perspective. And I hope our audience is getting a little hint of what we want to talk about in terms of building our skills beyond just being good process, technically oriented project managers. Mm-hmm. But if we switch the conversation now from the business side of things, what are some of the things that we're seeing from a business perspective in terms of applying what they're applying to respond to the influences that we're seeing? Are you catching anything from the business side that may be relevant to what they're doing?
I'm seeing a very slow recognition, but again, it's a negative recognition. Business is very hesitant to change once it figures out a way to do things. Like, if I can make money in this manner, I'm going to protect that with all of my extra money and all my extra protection. And so when they have that in place, they're very hesitant to change. So I see 2 or 3 other things going on in business and corporation that actually are saying, let's go back to the way we knew things were productive. This is an obvious, pendulum swing from what we went from our insecurity and our ambiguity under lockdown. One of them, obviously, was let's get everybody into the office. It's the brick and mortar. We paid for the brick and mortar. Let's get its value out of it. Let's make it happen. And anyway, we know how to work better face to face than we do remotely. Well, there's other things in place. We built this supply chain. We have like $10 billion of sunk cost over the last 50 years. And how dare we think about re-architecting how we're going to get the raw materials from, how we're going to decide when we need another provider and that kind of thing. And The problem is, maybe, what if things are going so fast, we can't make another plan for 50 years or even 10 years or even the next 5 years out? How do we make a plan that's as flexible as the changes of the environment? That's what I don't see. And again, this is what we as project managers have to build into our projects.
It is. And I think the other thing that I'm seeing, how do I put this? I'm seeing a move sort of towards business understanding that they do need to provide input. You know, when I grew up in this industry, they would turn over, they, meaning business, would turn over. Here's my problem statement. See you in a year with my system. Whatever we delivered, they accepted, even if it didn't work that well for them, because after all, we don't think like them, we think like us, right? What I'm seeing now, slowly over the years, and I think this has to happen with business, is in partnering with us, they have to come alongside us and say, okay, in order for my subject matter experts to come alongside your development experts, I'm going to have to do certain things. I may have to train them in certain processes. I may have to pre-train them in understanding what it is that they're looking for from how to use a system. So there's a lot of pre-project influence that they can provide, even just for their subject matter experts that they're loaning to the project. So things like that, where they're providing their input to their end product, I think is really important.
What you're describing is indicative of what I've discovered through research and personal experience. And here we are as advisors, and the companies may not be ready for these conversations, but I think we can prepare ourselves as project managers for these conversations to say, when you're ready to talk about this, these are the ways to work best with us. Now, until that happens, there are two things we can do as project managers. We can practice, practice, practice. And as we practice, we can demonstrate results out of our short-term pieces of work, 2-year work, 5-year work, and show how these things are effective. And we can create those success examples for when people are ready to listen, those windows of opportunities, teachable moments that we have either in a conference room or in a restaurant.
Yeah, and I find that maybe they're not as prepared as we would like them to be from an IT perspective, but I found that the clients that I have worked with, the large organizations that I have worked with, are more than ready to respond once they understand the need for their input. And I can give a couple of examples. One is, and I've used this before on prior podcasts, but I remember very specifically, we were in a situation where somewhere in the schedule, 8 months, 9 months into the future, there was this large taskbar that says the client has to test this system before we go live. And from their perspective, they accepted that, yeah, we have to test the system, but they were thinking of the old days. They would make a change to a legacy system, bring 5 people in from the field. They'd pound the keyboard for a couple of days and they say, yep, this works. Nope, this doesn't work. What they didn't understand is that there is a process and a technique to actually setting out a test methodology in terms of looking at permutations and combinations of business opportunities that they must fill. And until they understood that, they didn't understand this huge task that was ahead of them. And so they loaned me, in this case, 25 people or 20 or 25 people for 8 or 9 months just to prepare for that testing effort. And we were largely successful. But up until I was able to work with them to educate them to the need for their input, they weren't prepared to do anything. They were just going to come in and pound on the keyboard for a few days.
Yeah, and again, this is I hope for this as a transformation for many clients, for all corporations, to understand that, yes, I am not the person who lives in your business environment day in and day out, but I have a unique set of tools that allows me to pull out specific information for this tiny change. And I can give you advice on making this tiny change that you've handed to me very, very successful. And that's what I hope for us to be able to do. I think that's the role of the advisor, not to replace these people who were the experts of industry, but to actually within our domain, be able to give them something that's of value to them.
Well, and I think also to embolden them such that they feel compelled to provide input. So if I say I'm going to describe a process in terms of how I can technically handle something for them, I need them to say, that's great, but it's not going to work because what if we did it this way? You know, in the old days, they would just accept what we provided to them and then live with that result. But now we need to put them into their environment where they work so that the solution that we factor for them works for them, not just for the sake of having a faster technical solution.
That brings up a great point. As a project manager, I have to consider that this is not my deliverable. It's not my team's deliverable. It's their deliverable. But you know what? I think we're missing a big part of the message, that we need to actually educate and communicate to our stakeholders. This is their deliverable, and they have permission to actually tell us no when it doesn't make sense. And this is a conversation that I think that we can actually have a lot of influence on.
It's huge, and we can help them prepare their culture to not only work with us as IT professionals, but also to work on behalf of their end customers, so that the solution that we collaboratively put together affects both, is influential and is good for both them and their own customers. I remember very specifically one time we were presenting a particular functional enhancement for a large project, and one of the end users, one of the subject matter experts, says that's not going to work. And we kept thinking, why not? And she finally, in frustration, said, tomorrow we're going on a field trip to one of our field offices. We want you to see this with your own eyes as to what's happening in the field office. The minute we saw the chaos in the field office, we came back and reconfigured the entire solution so that when it was rolled out, the field offices were less chaotic. But had they not stood up to us and said, no, we're going to show you. And that's what I call, that's the whole part about collaborating and partnering with us. And I think changing their culture so that they treat us not just as a turnkey operation, but as true collaborative partners in developing those systems. And the reason I bring this up, Tim, is because I think as we go into the future and as we talk to those people who are up and coming as project managers, this is a skill that we need to learn beyond just being able to draw a Gantt chart.
Yes. When I went through consulting school, you stopped being a manager of work. You begin being a solver of problems and an advisor to people who make decisions. And again, it's a mindset change. It's an attribute. It's a character and behavior change. It's a people change. It's not necessarily a technology change.
Well, and I think, we've seen with AI, it would not surprise me if by the time that those people listening to us now are in the prime of their career, there will be enough technology out there such that the end users will feel like they don't need us anymore. And so that's another change that we may want to prepare ourselves for, because let's face it, IT is still IT. We are still experts in technology, and we can still come alongside our partners in those situations.
Yes. I think IT, and this is something we can talk about this. I think IT has gone through one of those cycles And yeah, we can have that conversation very easily, because IT started off being a cost center. And it
Ah,
wasn't until IT was redefined as a value center, not profitability, but value, delivering value. And again, we're not talking about, a metric like days or dollars or risk or anything. We're talking about something that's both qualitative as well as quantitative, that people want and desire. And so if we can actually hit on some of those topics, as well as I think we can learn from our own history and other discussions.
you just reminded me, and this is off the IT topic, but on the topic you just mentioned. We were recently on a small weekend vacation, and we took one of those rough riding Jeep tours up into the hills, the kind that bounces you all around and you go over ravines and over, those kind of things. What you talked about in terms of cost center, they had a maintenance department that worked all night to make sure every single Jeep was 100% capable of doing the same thing again the next day. So that
Wow.
was a true cost center, until someone came up with the idea that if we actually refabricated some of these Jeeps that we buy off the line, we can actually embellish our product. And what was happening then, you had the manufacturer coming to them and saying, what are you guys doing that we can implement in our shop? And so their cost center became a well-known profit center, as well as they were advising other areas. So yeah, there's things that we can do, modeling opportunities as we move through this to enhance our skills and to enhance our product delivery for our clients.
Wow. Wow. That's exciting. And you're painting a vision, not just of a tour company, but of project management as well. How can we actually provide such value where the decision makers come to us? I remember such conversations we had as consultants. What can we deliver back value that the company gets so excited about that they can start promoting to their fellow travelers?
Well, and because our experience, I don't know about yours, but in mine, it wasn't so much that they would come to us for advice. They used to come to us and say, this is how it's got to be. A lot of times we need this change. Well, they didn't wait for the advice. So you're exactly correct. The minute that we can collaboratively partner with our business vice presidents and our stakeholders and work together to engineer a solution that works best for the corporation, we will be far more successful, both in projects and in our own careers.
I like this. I like where we're going with this. Now, what our task is to put a series of episodes together that actually provide value to our peers and other people who are interested and curious about the project management profession.
Yeah.
I think we can do this well. I think we have, enough history and enough experience that we can actually start connecting the dots. What do you think?
I think exactly that. Even as we were having this conversation, I was thinking in my mind, the skills that I wish I had 20 years ago, that I had to develop sort of on my own, those things that are more concerning to us as project managers, like being adaptable, being resilient, because things, we talk about change. Sometimes that change is negative. So we need to adapt to that. We need to be resilient. We need to have systems thinking. We need to have leadership skills that are not just in terms of bringing in projects on time within budget, but actually motivating and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of topics that we can bring to this discussion.
You asked me what we could talk about that would be meaningful. I would say project managers have to learn ethics. Project managers have to learn, the ability to manage conflict. They have to learn how to do this, and it's all task-based, right? I think what you're saying is maybe not just delivering what we know is common sense and we've known all along, but finding a different way to deliver it. Like you said, delivering it in such a way with conviction and with other mechanisms that we can do to actually help express not necessarily the tasks and the effort to be done in doing the work differently, but the value and in the application of this. We're talking about something that is difficult to actually convey even at the best of times. We're talking about, character, we're talking about behavior, we're talking about ethics, we're talking about, this whole thing where it's easier to show people instead of just tell people. And this is what I hope that we can spend a little time on as well.
Yeah, you mentioned value. Value is something we as project managers typically did not think about before. We responded, in my case, I would respond to a request for proposal. We had to do A, B, C, D, E. When we got E, we got paid and we got out. And so was there value? We think there was, because that's what they asked for and we delivered what they asked for, but then we went on to our next job. But did we, in fact, the whole time we were doing A, B, C, D, E, were we thinking, is this going to bring value to the organization that I'm working for? In some cases, it was obvious because they brought us back for another job. I'm wondering if in those cases we didn't come back for other jobs, if we didn't really provide the value that was expected.
I think this is going to be a longer series of episodes than we've talked about in the past. And I think that you and I have an opportunity to explore things, not just that we've learned, but we're questioning ourselves. And it would be interesting for us to lay those out and to invite comments from our community as well.
Yeah. It just occurred to me, an experience I had, this goes back several years, when online interactive systems for the end user were first coming into sort of fruition at that point. And I remember specifically, maybe this was one of my turning points, going from IT process to IT value. But I remember very specifically, after we delivered a project and watched what was happening during the implementation timeframe, talking to a young mother with a child. And the system that we had delivered was to allow people to apply more quickly for benefits that they needed, particularly for young children who were disadvantaged. And I talked to this young woman and she was crying. She had tears in her eyes. She said, the last time I needed help for my child, I had to go to an office with a sick child, sit in a lobby for several hours, fill out mountains of paperwork, deal with incorrect results, wait for 90 days for some sort of assistance for my child. With this system, 15 minutes ago, I got online, filled in my information, and I just got a notice that my benefits will be available tomorrow. Now, did we build a system? Yes. Did we build value? Immeasurable. And I think that's kind of where I want to go with what we want to talk about for this year. What are we doing as IT professionals beyond just delivering a system?
That is where I'd like this conversation to go as well.
Yeah.
This has meaning, because not only does it demonstrate the relevance of the work we're doing, it's making a positive change, but it actually reflects on the people who are doing the work and the people who are supporting those people doing the work, which is us.
Absolutely.
This is exciting.
Well, great. So I see that we were coming to the end of our time. This has gone by very quickly today, Tim.
Yes, it has been. I think that we care about this topic and this series of topics. And I'm looking forward to starting to do the research and starting to pursue some of these questions that you and I have. Where can we reach you if we want to talk to you this next week?
Well, I'm still hanging around LinkedIn. So Merv Jersak, is my LinkedIn profile, or People First Project Management on the LinkedIn. So both
Very
of them.
good. Very good. And myself as well. LinkedIn is a good place. There are other platforms that I'm pursuing too, that you may be able to see me at and talk to me with also.
All right, then based on that, why don't we bid adieu, and we'll pick this up again in next week or the week after.
Let's do that.
All right.
Thanks again, Merv, and thanks to everyone for checking us out.